We're joined again this week by a talented group of local journalists who have also helped us come up with this list of the top stories of the year. We welcome to the table Mary Hudetz, a reporter for the Associated Press, Jeff Proctor, a reporter for both the Santa Fe Reporter and New Mexico In Depth. Inez Russell Gomez is with us. She's editorial page editor at the Santa Fe New Mexican. And Andy Lyman, reporter at the New Mexico Political Report. Thank you all for being here. Coming in at number 5 this year is new scrutiny for the criminal justice system here in New Mexico. From controversial bail reform to Albuquerque's ongoing efforts to reform the police department, which is still part of a Department of Justice consent decree, as you know. Now, Jeff, you cover these issues extensively. New Albuquerque Mayor Tim Keller seems to be making good progress in terms of that consent decree, but there's been some controversial moments as well, namely the hiring of former U.S. Attorney Damon Martinez certainly was involved in a controversial ATF sting, in which you've been covering for several years now. Let's start there. That was an interesting story. Let's talk about Mr. Martinez second, but talk about that ATF sting and what that meant overall for Albuquerque and what you discovered.
Sure, there had been this massive undercover law enforcement operation led by the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives that was supposed to, sort of clean up the mean streets of Albuquerque. Officials had a big self-congratulatory news conference after it was all over and said we arrested 103 people. And then I basically spent the last 2 years of my life lifting the hood and looking underneath and found all kinds of problems, from massive racial disparities among those people who were arrested. They didn't get any of the kind of high-level criminals they claimed they'd taken off the streets. The design of the operation was a total mess. The team that came here and carried it out, everywhere they go in the country to do these kinds of operations, the same kinds of problems pop up. And Mr. Martinez was the U.S. Attorney at the time that the operation took place, so he oversaw that law enforcement operation. So when he was hired as a policy guy and as a legislative liaison for the Albuquerque Police Department that's had its litany of problems down the decades, it really upset a lot of people. Mayor Keller ultimately decided to stand by the hire, and we'll kind of see how that plays out. I'm still not completely and totally clear on what Damon's job is supposed to be at APD, but if he's in there writing policies, the policies and the way they're being crafted are directed by the Justice Department at this point, and one of those is a racial profiling policy. So I think that's part of what rubbed people the wrong way on that. Now, in terms of the reform effort through the DOJ consent decree process, yes, we've seen some better reports from the Federal Monitor and maybe an improved relationship, but I think it's important for people to remember that the bar was very, very, very low. The Berry administration and their leaders in the police department basically left office with the story of the assistant police chief surreptitiously recording the Federal Monitor with his body camera in an effort to set the Federal Monitor up. So it's good that we're doing better than that, but there's still an awful long way to go in terms of real culture change at the Albuquerque Police Department. We've had 8 shootings this year. That tops the 15-year average, and that's really what all of this was about to begin with. So, yeah, long way to go.
I appreciate that. That's a good summary there. Andy, when you think about the reporting on crime this year, as well as the year before and the year before that, it's not like just a 2018 thing, certainly. I'm going to make a guess here a little bit, but the public is very frustrated here. There can be no question. You look on Facebook, on blogs, it's just an endless litany of complaints about how APD is handling things here. Is it a matter of the public not knowing what's happening out there with these kind of situations, or are we just in such a pickle right now that nothing's going to satisfy anybody for quite a long time until the numbers just really get a lot better?
I think it's not so much that the information's not there. That the information's out there thanks to a lot of great reporting by Jeff and actually Mary as well. I think it's hard to differentiate the two sides, right? You've got there's always going to be the voice saying not all cops are bad and we have a tough job and look what we have to put up with. And then you've got the other side who are saying my family member was killed by an officer. So I think there's a lot of stuff to kind of sift through there. And so I think yeah, I don't know.
It's a tough one. And you think about the Victoria Martins case, Mary, for example. A lot of breakdowns, well documented now from the officers on the scene, given and all the way through the system. But wow, it exploded in the public consciousness here. That was the one, it seemed to me when I look back at 2018, that was the one that really got folks to sit up and say, okay, we need some changes here in some capacity.
Yeah, that's one where I think it like bridged administrations, so or different
right.
office holders. So Victoria Martins was actually killed in 2016, if I correctly recall, and like you said, just I think captured everyone's attention. It was in the middle of what a lot of people say was Albuquerque's crime wave. And there was a swift investigation that brought in suspects pretty quickly. And then this year, as the trial was nearing, Raul Torres, who was not the DA at that time, and was not necessarily working with the Berry administration's police department, said that the evidence that as we had known it, I mean, really literally the narrative of that case was not what was the reality, according to Torres.
That's a good way to put it.
That I think was a huge reckoning on multiple levels in the city. Maybe one of the biggest is always wondering, and with the police, how do you know what you know? And that had been, I believe, the result of what the authorities now say was some faulty early witness or suspect
That's right.
confession.
That's right. Very messy. And Inez, when you think about it in the bigger picture, I get a lot of feedback about the behavioral health situation. And a lot of citizens are out there saying, look, with less of these facilities, you have more potential folks in the street that might be inclined to commit crimes. And so this is all part of a big organic thing. It's not just this one narrow thing about law enforcement either doing or not doing its job. Talk to that a little bit. How do we reconcile that bigger picture and when it comes to crime in the city?
I think to do that, you really have to look at the idea of prevention as a strategy and as a policy.
Right.
If people are getting the help and the treatment they need, even if, let's say, you're a drug addict and you need treatment, maybe you're not stealing or robbing to feed your habit.
Right.
So you go back to the source of crime. If you're poor and hungry, you don't excuse crime, but you maybe give people fewer reasons.
That's right.
And I think as a society, if we don't glorify criminals as much, this sounds really silly, but I keep thinking, I love Breaking Bad, everyone loves Breaking Bad, but think about Albuquerque and the popular consciousness as a place where everyone runs wild and drugs are how we make our living.
That's right.
What did that do to our psyche?
Yep. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. I want you to wrap this one up, Jeff. You're the guy that looks at this kind of stuff a lot. The overall look at crime and reporting and where we sit here now, the question I asked Andy a little bit earlier, where do you see crime as a thing here in Albuquerque? What's going to happen here in the next couple years in your view?
I wish I could tell you what's going to happen. I mean, I think what we're starting to see is some of the numbers are starting to flatten at least.
Okay.
The 2017 numbers, we actually, for the first time in a very long time here in Albuquerque, had some dips in some crime statistics. Violent crime continued to go up. But some of the property crime numbers, they've started to get their arms around. I do think that the new police administration understands part of what Inez was talking about before. People don't rip off tubes of toothpaste and teddy bears to go sell at the pawn shop because that's a fun thing to do. They do it because they have an angry fix that they need to go get. I think there is a different sort of tone from the top at APD now. I don't know what the 2018 numbers are going to end up looking like. It looks like we're going to have fewer homicides than 2017, but again, that's a really low bar. Last year was a record-setting year in the city in terms of the number of homicides we had. But I do think that there is we're starting to see a little bit of a shift in philosophy or come from or worldview in terms of you can't just tackle crime as a single issue that exists in a vacuum. It's really, really, really complicated, and it requires sitting down and having conversations with people that you might not normally.
That's right. Appreciate that. Now, our fourth biggest story of 2018 is the struggle facing some of our higher education institutions. There are concerns about enrollment, budgets, and a new leadership at both the UNM and NMSU, but perhaps the most high-profile example this year was at UNM, where new President Garnett Stokes and new athletics director Eddie Nunez made waves by cutting several sports programs, including, of course, men's soccer. Andy, and lawmakers, community leaders, even Governor-elect, our governor-elect have criticized the decision that UNM made. But in the overall picture, How is UNM coming off here with this year of turbulence they just had? Where do they sit right now?
Probably not well. I think that this year is not a whole lot different than other years, but I've noticed that there's a big focus on kind of with the term how the sausage is made at UNM. People are looking or paying more attention to the books, the money, how their decisions are being made.
That's right.
The governor also, the governor-elect also said she would essentially clean house with the regents if she could.
That's right. Glad you got that in. Yeah.
She gets to appoint new ones, but there's a couple that she'd have to kind of figure out how to get rid of them if she wants to really get rid of them. So I think there's obviously two sides. There's the side that the really gung-ho UNM fans that are just, they want to protect the athletics department and are just sort of diehard Lobo fans. And then there's the people that are saying, well, wait a minute, our taxes are going to what now? And
Right.
why are you making these decisions?
That's right, especially things like the football program. If you're not into football, people can't quite make the financial connections. It's a difficulty. Jeff, the idea that they've had transparency issues over there as well, let's talk about that. This goes back certainly further back than 2018 by a long stretch. You think about the Daniel Libbets of the world, others have been throwing in on where UNM has been. Where do you sense where these guys are at now on transparency?
I think they're flailing is where they're at in terms of where transparency is concerned. I think you're going to see the UNM Foundation, the university, and the Lobo Club all continue to fight the victory that Dan Libet won in his lawsuit to sort of get a look at, like Andy was talking about, how the sausage is made and how the money flows through the university, which would inform how some of these big decisions about how UNM works for people who care about the institution. I went to UNM. I want to see the school succeed and all of that. But to answer the question you asked Andy, the high-profile sports teams can't win games. Every Regents meeting turns into a night of WWE wrestling. They're all screaming and yelling at each other all the time. The university's not coming across as you don't hear that phrase anymore. It's the flagship institution in the state of New Mexico, and part of that is because of the work of journalists for showing that there are real problems over there. But on the transparency front, they just don't. Like so many other state agencies, I don't know if it's an issue of competence among the records custodians or those at the top, but they just don't process information in a particularly timely or fulsome way for people who want to see how things work there.
Could use that word fulsome there. Ideas about charging per page and all these kind of crazy things, it gets goofy after a while. But Inez, we can't leave out state. We talk about UNM, but we had the Gary Carruthers situation down there. That was very interesting. When you think about his history here, of course, his place in our history, and where a lot of folks, he had his fans. Yep. Let's just put it that way. And what they did instead of him was have the two-headed monster instead of the classic single person at the top. How did that situation unfold for you, and what does state kind of come out of this?
I think watching it from Santa Fe, the idea that you are not necessarily grateful to someone's service, but you respect someone's service, and I did not believe that it was handled in a respectful way. Not just because he's a former governor and because he'd worked so long for New Mexico State, but because he did a really good job. When budget cuts started happening, state had gotten together and done a big overall look at its budget and did systemic cuts in a way that was very forward-looking, and that was at his direction.
That's right.
They did efforts to recruit foreign students as a way to keep enrollment up and to get tuition in because they pay full freight. So he did a lot of innovative things, and even if it was time for new leadership, there's a way to ease somebody out that's not disrespectful. That's right. And I think it goes back to the regents. Over the last two governors, more so than in the past, we've had very political regents. So getting rid of Gary Carruthers was not just about changing leadership, it was about the governor's appointees getting rid of someone that she found uncomfortable for some reason. So I think we need to return to regents who are there to run the university, not to carry water for a governor.
That's a good point there. Mayor, let's finish with this idea. Enrollment has been down for all of our higher learning institutions across the state, and it doesn't look like it's really kind of coming around. UNM, of course, something near almost 10%, and that's a pretty big financial hit when you do the numbers for it. Is there something bigger going on here about New Mexico that we're not picking up on? About
Yeah.
about why this is happening statewide?
Yeah, we've had this conversation at this table this year. Certainly, affordability is an issue, but also preparing students. I mean, we're going to talk today about the education lawsuit.
right.
I mean, it starts before college.
That's right.
Yeah, and preparing kids and those freshmen, and I think freshman enrollment numbers are key, and they're struggling with it. And you've got to serve the state, which has a lot of, which is a poor state and has a high minority population. And so I think it could be years before we're coming around on it, but who knows? Maybe they'll come up with a strategic plan. That
And it comes up a lot. Our
It's a home
colleague Dan Foley talks about this a lot, that we may have just flat out too many institutions here. But that's a difficulty too because of the size of our state. You take one away, you can't ask folks to start commuting a couple hundred miles either direction. It's just not going to work. So the answers are going to be difficult to find, aren't they? It's going to be a difficulty. Yeah. That's all we have for now. When we come back to the line table, we'll find out what stories came in at numbers 3 and 2 of our top 10 list.